Hi, welcome to Show Studio's live panel discussions, where we discuss and sometimes even drag the biggest fashion shows of the season. I'm really excited today because it's Milan Fashion Week and we're talking about Prada's Autumn/Winter 24 womenswear collection. Before we get into it, I'm joined by a really fabulous group of industry experts today who are going to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Faisal. I am the editorial director of Prada A and curator of new aesthetics and futuristic and sustainable lifestyles.
Hi, I'm Daniel Peters. I'm the founder of DEI consultancy Fashion Minority Report.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Mezzi. I'm a lecturer at St. Joseph Martin, Ravensbourne and LCF, and I'm also a writer and researcher.
Hi, I'm Sarah Faisal. I'm the director of Barabu, which is an archive womenswear showroom.
Amazing. I'm really excited to talk about this collection because I think there's always so much to unpack, especially with this one. But before I get into it, I want us to talk about Prada being the hottest brand in the world, according to the Lyst Index. For those who are unfamiliar, the Lyst Index is a quarterly report that talks about the top brands and products in fashion based on their own algorithm of social media engagement, online purchases, and Google searches. So why do we think Prada is so hot right now?
Could be many things. I would say the relationship that Prada has with its own archival is very successful, in the sense of there is a renewed interest in archival pieces, and brands are trying to reintroduce them in, let's say, catwalks and in their visual lexicon. But something that we often see in brands, especially recently, is that they take pieces from their archival and they almost like replicate them, but it looks like it's the yassified version of history, or like it's the past, but it's face-tuned. In this case, what I find very effective is how Raf and Miuccia, they go back into archival pieces and how they look at the visual lexicon, but they create something that doesn't feel extremely a replica or extremely artificial, at least in my opinion.
I think as well, I'd add that it's the minimal luxury, which is quite big right now. Like we've got brands like the Row, which everybody is wearing, and it speaks to the moment where, you know, you've got the distinguishable Prada logo, but the product itself is so stripped back, it's so plain, it's so simple that actually it fits into kind of the fashion elite wardrobe, especially because it's mostly black. But then you've got, again, that symbol, that signifier of luxury that everybody then puts on themselves, and it's kind of like, it's like a badge of honor. And that, for me, I think is why it tips into it. But then you've got, you know, different types of musicians and music artists wearing the product, which also puts it into a different spotlight because it's got that kind of streetwear element that you've got rappers wearing. You've also then got, you know, fashionistas wearing, so it all kind of blends in really well alongside each other, I think.
I mean, I think to add also to what Cecilia said is like the intersection between the archival and contemporaneity, and also this look into the future, which also makes the brand more exciting to look forward to. I think also how the brand Prada and Raf are working is to keep on the cutting edge by using also, you know, different techniques and sustainable techniques, but also into the communication. As you've just seen, of course, we just seen the arrivals, Emma Watson, but also this immersive communication that they use. Furthermore, of course, Prada and the Prada Group is also embeds Fondazione Prada that really brings this cultural unification and inclusivity between merging artists, fashion, and also music with Raf. And that's why culture is coming through, and by making culture this way, we also create a community that makes it very strong and makes you go to the top index.
Yeah, I feel like it's not only like Miuccia's ability to like reference herself, but also Raf's ability to bring something new in. So, like you said, it's always like cutting edge. It's keeping themselves on their feet, but also like we're interested, like we're talking about them right now, but also it's timeless. There's something timeless about Prada that has allowed them to prevail and to continue to be at the top of the industry.
I wanted to start with this question because I was watching some old Show Studio Prada panels as research. I'm pretty sure it was 2017, and there was this consensus that Prada is a fashion favorite, that everyone was looking to Miuccia to set the trends, but that wasn't necessarily translating into commerciality and success. They talked about being slow to the digital landscape and the social media landscape and not having an it bag. I think this idea with the archive is really interesting because their it bags are reproduction bags, right?
Yeah.
But I think to that point, like what's made them hot has been like the nylon element. Like who doesn't kind of have a Prada nylon bag? And then also the boots that they did, like it's brought in a different consumer demographic that's then brought into the brand because of the nostalgia that we also love within the fashion industry. So I think with all of those types of elements, it's, you know, it's put this focus on the brand again because of, you look at the triangle and it's like, oh, okay, it's like the signifier of like modern luxury. And I think that's what a lot of people are striving for.
Something that I found quite interesting is after the first collection that they had together, which was during the pandemic, they had like Q&A on social media. And there was this question in which Miuccia was asked, like, what is Prada-ness, which is what is making the brand so appealing right now. And she said, like, I can't describe it because I do it. But then Raf came in, and it was interesting that he could articulate what Prada-ness was. It's as if he's an outsider operating as an insider. And so it helps to have that kind of degree of separation to then look at those essential elements. There's no space for accidents, I feel like, in these collections. There's no space for something that feels accidental.
Can you expand on that, this idea of accidental?
Yeah, in the sense of, it looks like this is the archetype of those elements of Prada that are making it recognizable. So it's as if there are those elements of like transparency and shapes, movement and so on. But it really feels like he's almost like a bit adding this aspect that feels a bit like surgical about Prada, that then I can see how it has an appeal that is much broader because then you have these pieces that are really versatile.
I love that idea that he's an outsider within the inside, because that's exactly the kind of mentality I applied to him when he was doing Calvin Klein. He was reimagining Americana as a non-American based on memory and idea and media that he consumed growing up in Belgium. Which actually I think is really interesting with this collection, that idea of memory and using memory as inspiration. I don't have the show notes from the brand yet, but on their caption on Instagram, they said the collection is fragments of histories and there is a romance with the past. Did we get that with this collection? Did that become blaringly obvious?
It was definitely a romance of the past. There was a lot of, I'd say, not necessarily even archive, but just almost pre-war aesthetics shown a lot, which was like very interesting to me. A lot of the silhouettes, a lot of those hats, and it's like, it's just it's not even outdated, it's almost predated, is what I would say, because we haven't seen those kind of things brought forward recently. I think a lot of collections try to be super futuristic, so it's interesting to see something so past referential, like being brought forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to add a little comparison here. Last month, we were left with this Prada AW24 man, where we see this Prada man that really goes out in the bustling office wear and is living in this really urban and industrial life. And also, of course, he had this contact with human nature. But now we see a Prada woman that is going to the front, that is wearing helmets, is wearing hats, is ready to go to the front, is out there, doesn't matter where, the Prada woman is ready to go. And I think this is a little detail that is important to see between how the brand is approaching both the menswear and the womenswear. Yeah, in particular, I think the most standout details here are the compositions between outerwear and also chic wear, which I think is a combination of the two designers of Raf and Miuccia are really marrying their ideas together. But this also way of mixing textiles and textures, it really also brings back to this system, ideal system of circularity, which also in this, pre-date war or post-war, it's really important to, get the pieces and put the pieces together,
I mean, war was an interesting point because for me, it felt very German Gestapo. Like when you look, probably shouldn't say that, but when you look at the initial first looks that come out, actually they're very Warden-like, from the structure of the hat, the shape of the hat, the outerwear. It's got such a strength to it, but it's playful and softer in some ways, which I think removes that kind of hard edge, as I say, of like German Gestapo. But what you were talking about with that blending of the fabrication, so kind of the backs of the jackets, which have like what seem to be a silk alongside the wall. I don't know how practical it is, but it's beautiful, and the Prada woman who's going to be wearing that coat, she's not exactly getting on the number 55 bus, she's jumping into a car. She's chic, she's elegant, and I think how they've blended that is really beautiful.
I think that's really interesting, this idea of these militaristic codes with this collection. I think Prada has always looked to utilitarian military uniform, this idea of uniform in her designs. But here it felt a lot more ceremonial than practical, and especially with the hats, because they were covered in feathers, or even that gesture, which feels very Raf Simons, but rather than a protectiveness at the end of the runway, it was like a pledge of allegiance. I mean, what do we think about this?
I mean, the idea of uniform
Yeah.
in this.
Or how she's played with it with this collection.
Yeah, it looks like she's looking at uniforms as the performative nature of fashion, and so it's because it has a certain function, because I might have a certain role and I might have to carry a certain type of labor, but it's also how I'm going to be perceived because I have that certain uniform. Something that was quite interesting was to see how you might be perceived from the front or like from the back. And so this idea of outerwear in the front and then having silk in the back, and something that looked really structural in the front, and in the back you had like ruche and silk and flowers. And so she's always playing with these contradictions within the garments themselves. But it did feel like there was like a conversation that she was having with the previous collection, but I found it like, if this is about the past and like romance, because I think she said that this is about romance as well. But it's
romantic view
romantic, exactly. But it's Prada romantic, and that's a certain type of woman, and so we expect it to then, we're not surprised if it ends with like a techno.
Right.
But the music was what was interesting as well, like having My Funny Valentine play in the middle of all of that, and then it was like, where's she off to next? She's off to a hardcore rave in like Berlin. But like, again, it's pieced together so well, and it tells such a story, and that's what they do so well together.
Yeah, it was a real kind of up and down of past, present, future, the hyper-feminine with the masculine, the utilitarian, and these 50s housewife silhouettes, which I thought was very fascinating. God, there's so much to talk about. Where do we even begin? Let's think about the men's show and the kind of this story that she's woven from men's to women's. Men's really played up on office core and the 9 to 5, and the juxtaposition between the modern office corporate world and nature. The set was exactly the same this time around, but I think the themes were very different. How did you guys interpret the women's wear versus the men's wear?
It's like even looking at the contrast in the lighting. This is like bright white office lighting. You can see everything. You can see everybody. And the women's, it's dark. You can only see the women. The crowd isn't even really like present. I feel like it speaks to the garments a lot more.
There's almost something threatening about the women's show versus the men's show.
Yeah, and it's almost like that play on gender stereotypes as well. Like he's gone to the office, he's gone to do the work. Whereas you were kind of saying, like with these, kind of this, what period did you say for the women's silhouette was?
50s.
50s, like housewife. And that she's kind of, you know, again, to your point, she's going somewhere, but it's like she's not going to work. So where is she going?
To war?
Yeah, to war. Like, what is that journey that she's going on from those hats? Whereas the men's hats even were just more like swimming caps, you know, which I think I saw on a publication today. But it's interesting how they've played with that. There's more of a softness in some way to the men's wear. He's going to the office, even those blue boards in the background, which give like that set of an office space.
Cubicles.
You know, in contrast to this starkness and this depth and this darkness of the women's wear show. It's, you know, again, I'd be interested to see the show notes afterwards.
It's quite interesting to see how in this case, like in the men's wear, it looks like the currency could be the labor and work. But in the case of women's wear, the currency could be vulnerability or not vulnerability, which is, I think, really plays with themes that are quite common with women's wear or like with Prada and women's wear, and what's desirable in either cases. Because ultimately, if you look again at the performative nature of fashion, is inevitable that could be like a really strong currency within women's wear.
I think here we're also expanding onto what is really close hearted to Miuccia since, you know, the 80s and the 90s, which was, you know, being a protester for women's rights, you know. And so what we're seeing is like every season this implementation of the freedom of women and also of the strength of women and representation. That what was interesting to highlight that throughout the whole collection we didn't see like any trousers. It was mainly skirts or really tight skirts that kind of always allude also to the trousers, but there might be some reason, I think, for that, which could be also the romantic 50s and historical reference to that. But I also, looking at this skirt and this dress, it does give me the feeling of lightness, which is something that is coming through a lot since also Raf came in, with transparency, with continuation, smoothness, but also what also is important to highlight that marrying Miuccia also with Raf comes in with architecture as well and character and definition. And so this is what we are seeing, this difference between the men's and the women. It's because really Prada, Miuccia as well, and Raf together are trying to shine a light on the powerness of women can have. Whereas now we're looking at a man this season that is running to the office with, of course, this natural connection to life, but always in this bustling way. Instead here, the woman is at the forefront.
What do we think about that gender dichotomy, though? I mean, is it strange? Is it bizarre? It's almost taking these very, I don't want to say normalized ideas, but the hyper-feminine and the contrast of a woman being strong and vulnerable at the same time. Whereas I think the men's didn't have that nuance. What do we think about that?
Personally, I think Prada is really tapping into like the archive in an intelligent way, but what was radical 30 years ago is not radical right now. And so for me, it was quite interesting to look within the context how radical it was, like her first collections, in the sense of even in 1996, when it was defined as ugly chic, which she apparently hates because she described it as, I think, Bano eccentricity, something like this. And something that was very interesting was the fact that it had such a strong reaction from the audience, and it was defined as terrible, but it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. But the thing is, I think the audience wasn't shocked at the garments. They were shocked because they loved it. They were shocked because they liked it. They were shocked at the idea of what they might actually find desirable. Because maybe a librarian with a skirt that is below the knee in an old cardigan, maybe you might find that desirable rather than what society is telling you that is actually desirable and so on. So I think some themes were radical back then. But if we translate them now, this dichotomy and this binary, it absolutely isn't radical. Then clothes have no gender, so you can wear what you want.
Yeah.
We have womenswear and we have menswear, but that doesn't mean that then this is how they're going to be translated then by people that are buying these clothes. But the way that's presented, it's within a binary.
I think it's interesting because now that we're looking back at it, there doesn't seem to be much more in common between the two collections besides the set.
Yeah, I think
The
that
clothes
was...
don't actually
They're two
parallel each
separate
other.
things.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the colors come back through of like the reds and the purples, but not.
Yeah, there's not much.
Yeah, the reds, the purple, the greens.
I found that really fascinating because
so
I
I
think
wonder what
Prada for so long has really mirrored their...
Also the hats as well. you
Yeah.
know. I was actually surprised because when we watched the menswear, I thought this is we were going to see also the cuffs on the women's collection, but actually it was just military like hats.
There was more strength in the women's than the men's, which
Yeah.
is really fascinating.
I think also what I'd love to highlight in this collection, which I noticed, is also the new, maybe not new, but also the use of these arm cuffs for holding the bag. As you can see from these, they're also of different colors. I think it's also an extra piece. I don't know if they did it for, what do you guys think, for comfortable, because it's more comfortable, more easy to carry around, or is it just for...
Like armor.
For the fashion, for the...
Is it a weapon?
Yeah, it feels like she's brandishing a weapon.
Yeah, because she can...
I like that she has the hand on the heart at the same time. So it reminds me of...
All of them have it.
Yeah, they have like this hand on the heart. Reminds me a bit of a gesture, also this hand of the first collection that they did together. That is also referencing how Miuccia is often like wearing her coats. And I think the last collection that Raf Simons did, Gilles Sander, they all had this gesture. But I found it quite interesting in the sense of you could use both of your hands. I personally find it a bit frustrating, this idea of I have to carry multiple things at the same time, which is often in women's wear. But I like the idea that you have both hands available, but one, you use it to either like protect yourself, like I don't know, but there's a form of gesture that seems to be probably like around protection or like on the heart.
Yeah, but there is a level of practicality to the cuff.
Yeah.
Or if you want to call it that, it seems to just be a cuff or a belt, but it will be interesting to see. I like the smaller bags with the bigger cuff because there is some level of practicality to it as well. Like you don't always want to be carrying a bag.
Oh God, yeah, I hate it.
And then also, women's wear doesn't always have pockets.
Yeah.
So it works.
Well, I wonder how much of this has pocket.
Yeah,
Does that dress have pockets?
it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, very interesting, this dichotomy. You, Cecilia, brought up that the editors, when that first Prada show was coming out, kind of surprised people at how comfortable it was, but also how ugly it was. I want to know our first impressions of this show.
Of this show?
This show, yeah.
First impression for me was this idea of, it's also the first show without Fabio Zambernardi, who was the director of design, who left before the latest menswear. So these are the first two collections without him. And I really see this like almost archetype of like what Prada-ness is, that is becoming like almost surgical in my opinion. But that's kind of my first impression, but I feel like it's also a feeling that you often have when you're watching a Prada show. Like you need time to digest it, and that's the beauty of it, because I think Prada is potentially a brand that if you want, it can make you think, which is, it doesn't feel like cultural references are an afterthought. in the case of this brand, is like part of the creative process. But I also enjoy that degree of separation of, I look at it, I'm gonna need some time to digest it. Do I love it? I don't know. Do I hate it? I absolutely don't hate it, like that's for sure. I see a lot of beauty in it, but I appreciate the fact that I might need some time.
I don't quite get the fur trim, like on some of the dresses and on the back of that dress there. Like, it doesn't necessarily translate for me personally, but whereas like I think there's a lot more cohesiveness across the rest of the collection. Like, yeah, this kind of section, I don't fully, feels like there's perhaps too much, like either go with the bow or the kind of faux fur, I'm imagining, trim around the neckline.
I think it goes back to this idea of ceremony and like military uniforms having adorned with stars and bows and ribbon and then cuffed with, there's almost something like Russian Revolution about it.
The fur is very Russian. But
The final looks are also super interesting because as we are moving from this, let's say, more chic looks, I really like the previous one, the purple one, and the previous one, which has this kind of structure that has this type of utility wear almost and uniform, but at the same time it's almost one of the most romantic looks as well because they use the gloves and all these details that make the whole look ensemble together, but also as the back that is open, they have this open back, which is also very interesting to see like the dimension they're going through this collection. But yeah, this is almost also the combination between a jacket and a dress, you know. I'm not sure what the material is, but from afar,
it looks nylon.
it looks like it's a rain-proof dress, and I mean that's why. Yeah.
She's ready to take on the elements.
Yeah.
And the gloves are actually, I didn't even notice the gloves before, but just that kind of scale and that play alongside the softness, I guess, of the dress in a way.
These are also snow gloves, almost. They're practically no snow gloves.
I want to talk about context a little. So 2023 was dubbed the year of the girl by The Cut, and New York Times did a piece on girl dinner, and Sandy Liang's bows have been just as criticized as they have been beloved. Where do we think this collection fits within this idea or this like reframing of femininity today?
I was shocked to see the pink bows.
Yeah.
I wasn't shocked to see them come up later in those little details, but that full pink bow look, I was like, oh. I was really underwhelmed.
And it was one of the first looks that to come out.
I was very underwhelmed. Sandy Liang just had her show, 2 weeks ago? And that could have fit right in there. And it just didn't feel like it needed a home at Prada. Because I think those like little bow accents, even at the back, with the rose in it, and those little belts were that was such a perfect way to reference that bow.
Yeah.
But it was a bit in your face with it, and it felt like some intern showed it to them, and they were like, oh, we have to throw this in there.
Love the intern.
But yeah, love to the intern. But it didn't feel necessary. It also felt like 2023, it didn't feel like it needed to be in 2024.
Interesting.
I like the black version of it because I think it felt more pared back and felt more Prada. Like, you know, I can't remember where it was. It was towards the beginning, but I think the black version felt more in tune with Prada than the pink, you know, version of it. And I quite like the bows at the back of the skirts, like, because there was structure to it. And I know Prada for structure, for form in that sense. But yeah, the pink version of it maybe felt a little bit lost.
What I find quite interesting is that there are some elements that we wouldn't normally think of with Prada, which is like bows and...
Yeah.
But like even flowers, we always think like Dries Van Noten is flowers, but like especially since Simmons joined, every single season it has flowers on them.
That is self-referential.
Yeah.
I think it is like the Spring Summer '97 show has a lot of the flower appliques. So it is interesting that like similar to those, that's something I've seen Miuccia do before, but It is interesting. It also is the Met Gala theme this year as well.
Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, and there's something to do with some flowers as well. So it'll be interesting to see what more we see with like floral accents this year.
What do we think Prada in this collection is saying about femininity? Womanhood, girlhood, power.
Does it have to say something about it?
No?
Maybe not. That's the thing. Like, I wonder if we're looking for messages on femininity in the wrong places. It can
But then I
say-
guess
yeah.
reframing the question, this depiction of femininity, what does that say about us today?
I don't think it says anything radical about where we are today. I would like to see how that can be interpreted. But the way that's represented within a fashion show, I see, like, again, very, very young, very thin, mostly white models.
Well, yeah, that was something I was like looking at the diversity of the casting. Like, ethnicity-wise, it was great, but I think age-wise, it could have been different. Size-wise, it could have been different. You know, they've had that previously when they've had like, is it Willem Dafoe and Jeff Goldblum walk in the menswear shows, and it just felt like a missed opportunity. It's kind of like, did you do that just for the talked about moment?
Right.
You know, or could you not have continued that through?
Going back to this idea of this gender dichotomy with Prada, they do love to pick their A-list actors to do campaigns and shows. Have we seen them do that with the female equivalent?
At Miu Miu. We see that at Miu Miu, but we don't see it at Prada.
But maybe because they don't need to.
More Prada beauty.
Yeah, but I also think the clothes speak enough for themselves. They might not need the gimmick. Like, maybe the point of the
But
having...
the men's needs the gimmick.
That's what I'm saying, is the men's need the gimmick, but the women's might not, so that might be why we don't see it.
Yeah, because hasn't it been like kind of dubbed the thinking woman's brand?
Yeah.
In that sense, so perhaps it's kind of like if we
The
put
woman doesn't think about diversity.
Yeah, potentially. Hopefully she does.
But also, I guess, as soon as you put a face to it, you lose. You lose that.
I guess it's in their front row.
Yeah.
You know, they had Yara Shahidi, they had
Like Tracy Ellis Ross.
Gwendolyn Christie. All of those women who are strong, powerful women who take control of their own narrative. I think that's more so where it kind of like, that's a beautiful look, in my opinion.
Oh, I think the celebrities dressed for this show were stunning. Everything looked great on them.
I think something that maybe many might not know is also that in 2020, just speaking about inclusivity and representation, Prada was the first brand to introduce, maybe one of the first brands, but to introduce a chief executive for inclusivity and diversity and representation within their whole company. So since we have that implementation, the representation, of course, as we see it on the front row and on the runway has changed. But we need to also remember that the representation also lays within the company, and that's also very important to make sure that the diversity of a whole brand speaks between all its realms, you know, in this sense. But yeah, talking about these looks are amazing. I really love the arrivals. It also was actually nice watching them live because it was actually the first thing you see. It's actually interesting also how they go for this mix between influencers but also icons and actors. For instance, Charlie D'Amelio, but also Hunter was there, and Emma Watson was there. And they both, like this, are attracting, you know, their community, and this is how they're building also their loyal customers, and yeah.
How important do we think this aspect of fashion and the fashion show is for Prada?
As in the...
Celebrity.
They're very picky.
Yeah,
They're
very
picky.
selective.
They're very picky with who they have in their clothes. I think because the Prada woman is such a standard. And
It's
you'd say
exclusive.
It's exclusive, but it's also like seen as like, I feel like if you get Prada, you've got your foot in.
Yeah.
You can get anything.
But even in that, like you were saying, it's this age gap that is not represented enough. And during this, also this Of course, we have Tracy Ross, but also in generally it's not been implemented on the runway, which is a bit of a shame because I think there are also beautiful men and women of different ages and ethnicities that really could bring this character to the runway and to the brand. And also going back to when William Dafoe came on the runway, it was really creating mostly of a buzz, but also an aesthetic. So I think we need to look forward to see more age inclusivity now than.
And size for me.
And size, yeah.
Because
and size is very important.
Yeah.
Also in the celebrity selection, there
Exactly.
was not size in there, and I mean there are so many talents are there of all sizes, but we still don't see it in the Prada woman selection.
And what does that show to the consumer? I think from who you've selected, it kind of speaks volumes in a sense of this is the aesthetic, and you guys mentioned the word exclusive, and I think that's the point. It ends up feeling like this upper echelon that not everybody can touch, even though the product would probably suit so many different types of proportion, but having Paloma, I can't pronounce her surname, so I'm not even going to butcher it. There we go. But having somebody like her walk in the show would be great because it would showcase so much breadth as to who can be the Prada woman. Whereas, we've touched on age, but that's not enough for me. No. Also, looking at the campaign image that was there, it's like it was just 4 white dudes. From that older perspective, it's not enough. We need to continue to push boundaries and barriers to break them, and having a figure like Paloma's, which is incredible and is actually, a typical figure that we do see when we walk down the street. Why isn't that represented on the runway? The fact that Paloma was the first curvy or plus size or fuller figure woman or model to win the BFC's Model of the Year, it shouldn't be a first in 2023 at that time. But it still continues to have to be.
It was really interesting to see her as an example, because in an interview she said, I'm done with form-fitting clothes. I want the Miu Miu. I want the Miu Miu mini skirts. But also we need to make sure that beyond representation on the catwalk, then brands, they need to sell clothes in those sizes, because sometimes it's purely performative. So they have plus-size models on the catwalk, but then they don't sell clothes that fit them. And so that's why then it has to resonate also when they are selling garments. We need to have more range than in the shops as well.
Because if not, we're sending customers to go in and look for it, but then they leave disappointed.
Exactly, because it often happened when brand included plus-size models on the catwalk, but then people that had a similar body type, they couldn't buy clothes when they were trying to purchase them either online or in shops and so on. So it really has to resonate both in terms of selling on the catwalk, and then selling sizes that actually fit people.
Yeah. Which is what Ganni does, I think, really well. They have from 0 to size 26, I think, in a US capacity. They have that size range, but they also have those women walking down the runway. They have those women sat on the front, second or third row, and it creates this sense of community. And I think Prada has, of course, its community, but it's more of an exclusive community.
Is exclusivity back in fashion? I mean, Prada's the quote-unquote hottest brand of the year, and they aren't exactly communicating community and diversity, or are they?
Exclusive as a word has both negative and positive connotations. It's exclusive means excluding somebody from it. So by that definition, are they losing a customer? Are they losing a demographic? Who is their demographic? Because you said, that list is the list is literally based off of internet sales, internet searches, but how many of those are actually reflected in sales?
Yeah.
And who is that demographic that's actually buying? Because when's the last time you bought a new Prada item? When's the last time you bought a new Prada item?
It's been never.
In this economy, I don't think so.
I mean, you're both wearing some Prada right now.
Yeah.
They're glasses.
Fine, sure.
So. It's a different price point, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. It would be actually interesting to see who is in that outfit when it comes out. who is in the form-fitting stuff, who is in the menswear, who is in that hat. I feel like we're going to see the bags,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we're going to see the clothes.
This is most brands. Most brands, they thrive thanks to accessories and makeup and perfume and beauty rather than actually selling like garments. Something that I think that it could be, you know, almost it's a blessing and a curse that Prada has is that it always thrived in that degree of separation between what represents in the people. That might look at the brand, it always had to be like aspirational, unattainable, hard to decipher. You can never fully describe who that woman is, and even the representation of the sensuality is really non-obvious and so on. So then you can interpret that degree of separation through cultural references and this like really cognitive labor that Miuccia always does and Raf Simons as well. But then that degree of separation could also reflect itself within a degree of excluding and being exclusionary rather than exclusive.
I think one of the ways kind of Prada and the whole brand is trying to tap in to be more inclusive is, and how it's actually thriving right now, is through this immersive visual communication they're doing. They're trying to bring you into this Prada dreamscape, which is of course what every one of us is dreaming to be in this Prada world, this Prada thing, especially also in their beauty. I've seen in many occasions, of course they have some ambassadors, but they are doing insane renders for the beauty, and also even for the pre-show and the post-show they are doing all of that. So this is how they're kind of catching the rhythm with everyone, but at the same time, for instance, what is also very cutting edge with Prada is also the digital, right? They're always the first to launch their capsule NFT. And again, if you want to put it on Cristina, the capsule NFT, I think it's very important because both this year and last year, Prada was the first luxury brand to drop an NFT. And let's say the concept of NFT is to make it more inclusive because the NFT is available to purchase or to be part in the community on Discord. Like on Show Studio, we also have the Discord guys, but Prada has one, and it's really putting a lot of effort into this Prada cryptid and this Prada animation where you get the physical and also the digital, so it's trying to stay ahead of the curve, but at the end of the day, you know, it's really, really exclusive.
I find really interesting the relationship of Prada with technology. Like they're gonna send their clothes to the moon, in 2025. The fact that they are working on this spacesuits with Axiom, I think, and it's going to be the first time since 1972 when the Apollo 17 was on the moon. So the idea that they are working on this and like their own relationship with technology as something that it often translates in fashion show as not necessarily as a degree of friendship that we have with technology whatsoever. I find it interesting because there are many, many contradictions in the brand.
Yeah.
And I love contradictions and I'm comfortable with them. But then you can see how a relationship with technology could be in all these, there are always like some barriers in their fashion shows. Like even when there was nature in the menswear or this time, there is metal, like there's iron and then there is glass. And there's always this idea of having almost like a lens in between what we're looking at and ourselves. Even the slime, it was quite interesting to see people that they have to like kind of move, and it's as if the slime of the past season kind of crystallized in glass.
It's a literal boundary.
It's like a literal boundary, but Prada really thrives having boundaries. I think like they create them and they play with them.
I think there's with what we're talking about with technology, there's so much paradox to Prada. It's both things at once and not.
I might have an idea why, though, if you don't mind. It's because we should not forget that Raf Simon is a futurist. He is a futurist. So what is interesting in futurist people usually is that they have this really great interpretation of the past and contemporaneity at the same time. And as a futurist, what you live on is this feeling of what is going to be undefinable and what's not definable yet. So I think, Miuccia is, of course, the visionary and the icon, but Raf is the futurist in all of this. And that's why this contrast is coming and all together, all at once.
No, that makes complete sense. Like, as you say, Raf is the futurist, and it's bringing in that new lens, that new eye. And as it was being said earlier about that external perspective now coming in, like, it's such a wonderful marriage of creativity and talent and kind of future-proofing the business in that sense for me.
He's a futurist, but he doesn't look into futuristic content as any futurist. Like, he knows that technology in the future is going to be balancing contradictions and contrasts, which I think for someone who is so intellectual and so cognitive is like a perfect marriage with Miuccia as well.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's kind of, we are already living this. We are kind of already living what the future might going to be.
Speaking of Raf and the future, we have a question from Instagram from @BDMeller, who asks, do you think Raf will take over Prada/Miu Miu in the future?
Yes. Like, I don't know if this is Miuccia's reign. It would make a lot of sense. I don't think that is necessarily a collaboration that started with this prospect. But I find it interesting rather than having this gap and this panic of being like, we need a creative director within 2 months because we have these seasons and the cyclical nature of fashion, but there's nothing natural about this. It feels like this is more like a collaborative nature, but then it could make a lot of sense. And it will be the first time, I think, that this happens for two people that collaborate rather than someone that is within the team. So this is like an explicit collaboration. We had many times someone that was working within the team that then was becoming creative director, but they were not under the spotlight.
But I'd be really interested to be in that design studio to watch, like, how are those decisions made? Who guides the team? Do they first sit down and think about what is, on the mood board, and then they both translate that to the, to the business? Like, that for me would be interesting to see how that marriage, again, use of word, how that works. Because typically you might have a head of womenswear and a head of menswear who's leading the creative vision, but this is really an amalgamation of the two kind of worlds brought together.
I think it's very obvious who does what when you watch the runway. I think I can identify a Miuccia piece and I can identify a Raf piece.
I cannot, I think.
I think you'd be surprised.
I think you'd be surprised.
I think if we were
I think if we all just stared at the screen and had a guess, I feel like
We should do a
have
game.
like a 70. I feel like we'd have like a 75 to 80% accuracy because. So almost because of that, I hope he doesn't. I hope it continues to be a marriage between him and her, but I think that it works best because it's a marriage between him and her, and I don't know if it would necessarily be Prada if it was just Raf.
Right. I feel that. I think it's really interesting, Cecilia, that you said it didn't feel like that was the prospect when this collaboration started. Because for me, that was always the prospect. And maybe I'm a huge Raf head, but Miuccia is in her 70s, and...
I mean, he's not far off.
He's farther off. I mean, no offense to Miuccia, but that line of succession kind of needs to happen with a billion-dollar brand like this.
Yeah, also it might also happen in a way that Miuccia might also dedicate more to her fondazione and to, you know, more of the artistic, also sustainable lifestyles as well. But like we've seen, for instance, with Vivienne Westwood and Andreas, that for years have collaborated together. At the end of the days, Vivienne was, you know, focusing on her NGO. So how I see it, maybe I don't see 100% Miuccia giving up to Miu Miu because that's her private wardrobe and it's something so personal. It's more personal than the Prada. But I do see Raf coming over with the whole creative direction of Prada.
I agree.
And I think Cecilia might be right.
But I love also to think about Miuccia's legacy, not just about Prada or Miu Miu, but also Fondazione Prada, and seeing like her translating her words towards contemporary art, which is kind of always what she wanted to do.
But you know, the story of Prada is like the story of many other Italian fashion houses. All the most Italian fashion houses started because they started doing leather goods. Because back then, the richest could only afford the leather goods to travel. So this is how, you know, with these bags and leather goods, we're still bringing this chicness from 100 years ago into now. And even though the ready-to-wear started in the end of the 80s, it's something that we are always going to look forward to the future. And with Raf as well, I want to see how maybe, I think this collaboration, of course, they're both working on the leather goods together. The leather goods, the original one is Miuccia, and then everything on top of it, I think it's Raf. Like,
I would love to know if her taste is changing as well. If she is also changing, because collaborations, they change you. So I would love to see. Yeah, they challenge you, and you're a different person after a collaboration compared to when you started. So I would also love to know if whether we think it has to be like a Miuccia element or a Raf Simons element, to see if they are slowly and gradually kind of merging.
Humanizing as well.
And I think they have to, because if not, it's kind of like there's no synergy. And they'd sit so far away from each other. And just one other final detail I love is the kind of apron-likeness of the skirts. And I think it goes back to that kind of woman, and that kind of male, woman, female element that we were talking about before, like the fact that she's wearing what looks like an apron, that's putting her in the home.
But the apron itself looks like a suit.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like...
It's like a uniform, it's like this kind of like armor in a sense as well.
It's something we didn't get to, but it's that perversity that really defines a lot of Raf and Miuccia's work. That's almost Lynchian. It's nothing's always as it seems, right? There's a seedy underbelly somewhere. Before we end off, I just want to check if we have any social questions.
Yeah, we have one saying, what do you think of the reuse of the set design?
I think it's sustainable.
I was about to say the same thing.
You know, I think it's great because when you look at what the cost is of a fashion show, to put all of this together, it's so much. So to be able to take, take it away, box it up, and bring it back out, I think is great when we think about sustainability in that aspect.
Yeah, I think the greatest thing is about this upcycling that we have for each show. It's not that we are separating the two into different realms of location. We just change a bit of the lighting this season, but we still have this installation by this artist called Amo, very cool artist. And I think really since Miuccia and Raf started working together, the set design really implemented, because also Raf used to be really into interior and into architecture. So I think also it's about having fun with that and also expand the collaborations on the collection, you know.
It's probably like the dialogue between menswear and womenswear is not in blurring the boundaries of who gets to wear what, but it's within the context and the setting. But again, yes, the idea that something doesn't have to be necessarily completely 100% disposable at every single fashion show. The fact that we're surprised says a lot about how we are so used to always needed to have this exactly, and this element of like shock and novelty. So I would wonder more, like, why am I surprised that they're using the same set? And it's time that we stop being surprised about it, probably.
But they did it with the slime, wasn't
As
that?
well,
At both
yeah,
the
yeah,
shows, like
yeah.
again, there's that continuity, which I think is great, and it's, you know, I love a set. I miss the fact that shows don't really have sets these days. It's, you know, the splendor and the interesting element. It's more than just talking about the clothes. It's talking about as well the people who have gone into building this entire world, and that's what they bring us into.
Any final thoughts? Did we like it more? Did we like it less?
I like it. I just can't afford it.
Same, literally.
I know, I love it, but I think it's always this idea of I can't afford it, but I can still participate in the intellectual play.
Yeah, I think the conceptuality is very important.
yeah.
Also for the wider audience to learn more about fashion, you know.
I'm just going to be interested to see how it trickles down
To where?
to the consumer. What from this becomes the it bag?
Yeah.
What from this? Are we going to see those bands
Are we
everywhere?
gonna see the hats anywhere?
Are we going to see the hats anywhere?
Or is just for editorial? Or
Yeah.
Are those, how I feel like we can see those leather jackets being wearable, but I can't see the fur trims.
No.
So, but maybe we'll be surprised. All it
It was
takes.
always surprising.
Exactly.
These also leather jackets are very nice. This is really kind of also a bit brings it back to the club scene as well. almost.
And those shoes, I can see those.
Those are
Yep.
They're really practical. I think flats are back
I
in.
love that we've said the word
very practical, and also they're also very, very resistant. There is this funny interview with Emma Watson where she's preparing her own cocktails wearing
Yeah, the shoes.
and she was
Oh my God, she breaks.
the eyes with the, and I was like, this is so surprising how hard a Prada shoe can be. you
Yeah.
know? And that's why now we have the handcuffs. you
Yep.
know, we are going to war. That's
Amazing. Thank you guys. And
you.
thank you, everyone at home, tuning in for our Prada panel. And we'll see you next time.
bye.